Some people come into our lives quietly, but leave behind echoes that never stop ringing. Let us know in the comments section below where you're watching from and what you would do if a stranger's past suddenly landed on your doorstep. The first time Chelsea Diggins saw the old man, she thought he looked like a ghost trying to remember the shape of his former life. He had walked in slow, careful steps and slid into booth 7 like he'd done it 100 times before. But that was the thing. No one in Grey Ridge had ever seen him before, and in a town where everyone knew everything about everyone, that made him a curiosity. Chelsea, balancing 2 mugs of coffee, caught his eyes as she passed, sharp, pale blue like river ice. He nodded once, didn't smile, didn't speak. "Can I get you something, sir?" she asked, gentle and patient like she always was, because life had taught her that sometimes people just needed a soft landing. He lifted one finger. "Black, no sugar." His voice was rough, low and worn like gravel under tires, and his eyes dropped to the table, his hands already folded neatly in front of him. He didn't pull out a phone, didn't fidget. He just sat. Still. Chelsea returned with his coffee, set it down without a clink, and smiled. "If you need anything, I'm Chelsea. Holler." He didn't respond. And that was how it began. 3 years later, booth 7 had become his place, his kingdom, his chapel, his final piece of earth. Every morning, same time, he would arrive at 7:02, like clockwork. Always black coffee, sometimes a biscuit, never conversation. The regulars at Gracie's Diner had gotten used to him, though none knew his name. They called him Silent Tom behind the counter, part mystery, part joke, and eventually part furniture. But Chelsea never called him that. To her, he was just the gentleman who preferred booth 7 and never asked for more than a warm refill. Some mornings she'd leave a little extra something on his plate, a banana muffin, a note that just said, "Good morning, hope today treats you well." He never reacted to the gifts, not really. But once, she caught the briefest glance her way after one of those notes. A flicker in the eyes. And that was enough. "Why do you even bother?" Sylvia, the other waitress, would ask, pulling her hair back with a tired sigh. "He doesn't even tip." "Because kindness isn't a transaction," Chelsea would answer with a shrug. "And maybe I just like knowing someone comes here because it feels safe." Safe. That was something Chelsea hadn't felt in a long time. Not since her brother Tyler deployed for the 3rd time. Not since the last time the Army called and told her they couldn't confirm his location. She never stopped believing he'd come back. But each day he didn't. She poured herself into this job, into the faces she could still serve, still help, still protect. And somehow this quiet old man had become part of that rhythm. Then one day he didn't come. At first Chelsea brushed it off. Maybe he had a doctor's appointment, maybe the weather had kept him in. But as the morning ticked by, booth 7 stayed empty. And not just physically. It felt hollow. Like something had shifted in the gravity of the room. Like something had been taken. The regulars noticed too. "Where's Silent Tom?" asked Earl, the mechanic with grease always under his nails. "First time I haven't seen him since my hip surgery," mumbled Donna, sipping her tea. Chelsea didn't answer. Her hands moved on autopilot, poor served smile. But inside, her chest felt tight, and the silence at booth 7 rang louder than any jukebox. 2 more days passed. Then came the men in uniform. They entered at 7:02 IEM sharp. 6 of them, all dressed in civilian clothes, but there was no mistaking the way they moved. Straight backs, eyes like scanning lasers. One by one they took off their hats as they walked in. Chelsea stood frozen behind the counter, coffee pot halfway to full. "Miss Diggins?" one asked, tall, African-American, a scar running from temple to jaw. His voice wasn't a question, it was a formality. She nodded slowly. "Yeah, I'm Chelsea." He took something from his pocket, an envelope. "Captain Thomas Beckett asked us to deliver this to you." The world tilted. "Captain, She took the envelope with trembling hands, eyes scanning the others, silent, solemn, standing, like a detail at attention. "This is his," the man added, motioning to a small wooden box another seal carried. "He wanted you to have it." Chelsea blinked. "What happened?" The tall man hesitated. Then he said gently, "Captain Beckett passed away 3 days ago. Natural causes, quiet, peaceful." A beat of silence. Then he added, "but not forgotten." Chelsea didn't open the envelope right away. It sat on the counter near the register, its off-white surface untouched except for her fingerprints and the black ink that spelled out her name in steady, unshaking script. Chelsea Diggins. She'd looked at it a dozen times in the hours since the seals had left, and still, something inside her wouldn't let her tear it open. The box was even more intimidating. Polished walnut, hand-carved edges, and a small brass clasp. It didn't look like something you'd buy. It looked made. Personal. Permanent. Gracie's diner had resumed its rhythm, though the buzz was offbeat now. The regulars had questions, but no one dared voice them, not really. Not when Chelsea had stopped refilling cups. Not when she was just standing there. Sylvia had taken over, which was a rare kindness, and for once even she wasn't cracking jokes. Chelsea finally stepped into the break room, tiny, windowless, with a flickering ceiling light and a couch that smelled like old fries, and sat. She set the envelope in her lap, the box beside her. She stared at them both. Then she reached for the envelope. Inside was a letter, hand-written, 4 pages. "Dear Chelsea, I imagine this letter might come as a surprise. If you're reading this, it means I've moved on. That's all right. I've made peace with it. What I haven't made peace with, what I couldn't leave behind, was you." Her breath hitched. "You probably never knew my name, not really. That was on purpose, but I knew yours. I knew your kindness, your consistency, your spirit. I want to tell you a few things I never said out loud. Things I want you to carry, not because they're burdens, but because they're gifts. From me to you." Chelsea's eyes blurred, but she kept reading. "My name was Captain Thomas Beckett, Navy SEAL, Vietnam, 3 tours. I lost more brothers than I can count, saved fewer than I hoped. But I made it home. Not all of me, but enough to sit quietly in a booth and drink black coffee while the world kept spinning. You were the first person in years who saw me without flinching, who looked me in the eye and didn't ask for anything in return. That mattered, more than you'll ever know." She pressed the page to her chest. She hadn't realized she was crying until a tear slipped down her cheek and hit the corner of the letter. The words continued. "You reminded me of my sister Rose. She was sweet like you. She died young. You would have liked her. She would have liked you more. That box beside you, it's got a few things in it that belong to you now. My service ribbons, my last journal, a photo from a long time ago, and my challenge coin from a mission no one talks about. The coin means something. Keep it safe. If anyone gives you grief, show them the coin. The right people will know what it means." Chelsea blinked and looked down at the box. "I know this is strange, but I wanted someone to remember I was here. Not just as a name on a memorial or a headline that no one reads, but as a man who sat at booth 7 and found peace because someone like you showed up every morning and smiled. Thank you for that. You gave me more than you'll ever know. In the event that you open this and you're standing, sit down now." Shelton frowned, still seated, and turned the page. "I've left some money for you. I asked the boys to deliver it quietly. You'll find a cashier's check tucked beneath the journal. Don't use it for bills. Use it for the thing you've been dreaming about but were too afraid to chase. Yes, I knew. You talking your sleep on your breaks." That made her laugh. An ugly, breathy, tear-soaked sound. And her hand flew to her mouth. "Go start that bakery you always whisper about. Name it something stupid. Something bright. Something with hope. Tell the world that Thomas Beckett believed in you." "I will. Chelsea stared at the letter, then at the box. She reached for the brass clasp with fingers that didn't feel like hers. It clicked open. Inside was everything he'd promised. The ribbons soft, slightly frayed at the corners, red, blue, bronze, gold, a folded photograph. Tom, as a young man, arms around 3 teammates, all shirtless in the jungle, grinning like wild things. The journal, brown leather, thick, with the initials TB embossed in the corner. And beneath it all, the coin. It was heavier than it looked, cold in her hand. One side bore the seal trident, eagle, anchor, pistol, trident crossed together in brass. The other side had words etched around the edge. The only easy day was yesterday. And beneath the coin, like Tom had said, there it was. A check. She couldn't even breathe. $5,000. Paid out to Chelsea Marie Diggins. Memo. For the dream. She clutched it all to her chest and let herself cry fully for the first time in months. In the silence, she remembered something. After the seals left, one of them, tall, red-haired, kind eyes, had turned back to her and said, "He didn't have family left, but he wanted you to know you were his family." Chelsea hadn't known what to say then, but she did now. She whispered to the air like he could still hear her, "Thank you, Tom, I won't waste it." Then, without another thought, she folded the letter, tucked it gently into the journal, closed the box, and made a promise in her heart. She was going to build something warm, something permanent, and every wall of it would remember him. The bakery didn't begin with a grand opening. It began with Chelsea staring at the faded for lease sign in the window of the old Henderson shoe store downtown, her reflection layered against the dusty glass like a memory waiting to be reborn. She stood there for what felt like forever, clutching Tom's journal under one arm and a cinnamon bagel in the other. It was still warm. Sylvia had insisted she eat something that morning. Grief is a damn thief of appetite, she'd said, but Chelsea hadn't tasted any of it. Her stomach was a whirlpool, nervous energy coiled with a strange, stubborn purpose she didn't recognize at first, until she walked through the doors. The space was awful. Peeling linoleum, cracked tiles, a broken ceiling fan that hung crooked like a drunk sailor. But it had good bones, her dad used to say about old things, the kind of bones you can build around. And that's what she needed. Not perfection, just potential. Tom had left her $5,000. It wasn't much by business standards, but to Chelsea it was holy. Not just money. Permission. A vote of confidence from a man who had survived war and darkness and still believed in her. That meant more than any loan ever could. She called the landlord the next day. He was skeptical until she mentioned she had the cash up front. Then she started cleaning. Every morning before the sun rose, before the diner even opened, she was there, scrubbing, sweeping, peeling up years of dust and disuse. Sylvia called her crazy. The cook, Jimmy, brought her a thermos of strong coffee each morning with a smirk and a "Look at you, boss lady." The name stuck. Bit by bit the place transformed. The journal helped. Tom's journal wasn't filled with war stories, not the way Chelsea had expected. It was filled with sketches of little towns he'd passed through, maps of diners he remembered from decades ago, recipes even. A lemon pie with toasted sugar crust, a bacon biscuit sandwich with maple butter, and notes to himself, simple lines. Don't forget the warmth in her eyes. The smell of cinnamon reminds me of Rose. If I had another life, maybe I'd have baked instead of fought. Chelsea copied his handwriting into her own recipe book. Every morning she read a page before she started sanding counters or painting trim. It made her feel like he was still there, right behind her shoulder, watching. Smile. The community noticed too. It started small. People walking by would peek in and see her on a ladder, hair tied up, paint on her jeans. She always smiled and waved. A few came in and offered to help. Earl brought an old oak table from his garage that just needed refinishing, said it used to belong to his mama and had too much memory to rot in storage. Chelsea cried when she saw it. Donna crocheted 2 seat cushions for the front window bench. "So customers can sit with their coffee and watch the town wake up," she said, with a proud little puff in her chest. Even Sheriff McAdams stopped by one day, leaning on the doorframe like a father trying to understand what his kid had gotten into. "You sure you want to do this?" he asked. Chelsea nodded without hesitation. "I've never been more sure." Word spread. The town buzzed with rumors that Booth 7 at Gracie's had turned into something else, something new, something that still carried the soul of the man who once filled it every morning in silence. People started calling it Tom's Place before she even had a chance to settle on a name, and once the name stuck, she didn't fight it. One night, Chelsea stayed long after the sun went down. The space smelled like fresh paint and hope. She sat at the new front counter, a steaming mug of coffee between her palms, and opened Tom's journal again. A slip of paper fell out. It was a photo, not like the others. This one showed a tiny bakery storefront somewhere overseas. Vietnam, maybe. Tom, looking far younger, stood out front holding a loaf of bread like a trophy. The caption on the back read, "Saigon, 1971. Best damn bread I ever ate." Chelsea smiled. "You're full of surprises, Tom." She placed the photo on the wall, just behind the counter. Not in a frame, just tacked there, visible, honest, like everything else about this place. The official grand opening was still weeks away, but Chelsea decided to open her doors the next day anyway. Quietly, no ribbon, no parade, just a chalkboard sign on the sidewalk that read, "Now open. Coffee's hot. Stories welcome." Her first customer was a little girl with a loose front tooth and $2 in quarters. She wanted a cookie shaped like a star. The second customer was a man who'd driven in from 3 towns over. "Heard this place had a seal's blessing," he said with a nod, his voice hushed like he was walking into church. "That true?" Chelsea smiled softly. "He sits by the window every morning, you just can't see him." The man looked at the bench, nodded once, and took a seat. That day she sold out of muffins by noon. That night, as Chelsea locked the doors, she turned to booth 7, the window seat, now polished and golden in the setting sun, and whispered, "We did it." And for just a moment she swore she heard the faintest scrape of a chair being pushed back, like someone getting up, satisfied. By the time the leaves turned gold and the wind carried the scent of autumn spice, Tom's Place had become more than a bakery. It was a ritual. Veterans from nearby towns started showing up, some in uniform, some not. They came quietly, sat near the window or at the back and ordered whatever was on the board. They never asked for discounts, they never talked much, but when they left, they always placed a hand on the small plaque mounted near booth 7. In memory of Captain Thomas Beckett, Navy SEAL. Brother, friend. He came for coffee. He gave us a home. Chelsea polished that plaque every morning before she unlocked the doors. One day, a teenage boy with braces and a green ROTC hoodie came in after school. He stared at the framed photo of Tom and the SEAL team hanging beside the menu. He asked, quietly, "Was he really a SEAL?" Chelsea nodded, sliding a peanut butter bar across the counter. "One of the best." The boy looked back at the photo, eyes wide. "He came here every day for 3 years?" The boy sat at the counter, unwrapping his snack. "My dad's in the Navy, deployed last month. He writes sometimes, but—" Chelsea waited. "But I don't know what to say back, you know." She understood. Too well. She walked to the bookshelf near the front door. Something the community helped her build, not for decoration, for memory. It was filled with worn military books, photographs, challenge coins, and letters. Letters written to and from soldiers, laminated and preserved. Letters like windows into a life most people couldn't understand unless they'd lived it. She handed the boy a notebook and a pen. "Write him something. Doesn't have to be perfect. Doesn't even have to be finished. But start it. He stared at the blank page, uncertain. Chelsea smiled. Tom always said, a few real words are better than 100 polished ones. The boy nodded slowly, and by the time he left, his hands were smudged with ink, and his heart looked a little lighter. That was what Tom's place did. It gave people room to breathe, to remember, to begin again. One crisp Thursday morning, the 6 seals returned. Same time, same silence. But this time, they weren't here to deliver anything. They were here to honor something. They took booth 7. Chelsea didn't speak. She simply brought over 6 mugs of black coffee and 1 extra. She placed the 7th mug in front of the empty seat at the head of the table, then stepped back. Chief Marcus Boyd raised his cup first. The others followed. They drank in silence. Then Marcus reached into his jacket and set something on the table. A folded American flag, small and framed. "This was his," he said, voice thick. "We've been holding on to it. For the right place." Chelsea's breath caught. She didn't ask questions. She just nodded and whispered thank you. The flag found its place above the window, above booth 7. Beneath it, Chelsea hung Tom's dog tags and 1 line from his letter, painted in delicate cursive across the wall. "You gave me more than you'll ever know." By winter, Tom's place had become a kind of sanctuary, not just for veterans, for widows, for high school kids trying to figure out who they were, for old couples who still held hands, for anyone who'd ever felt invisible and needed a reason to be seen. And Chelsea? She found herself becoming someone new, someone not just surviving, but building. She took a few business classes online, learned how to manage inventory, payroll, taxes, even hired her first employee, a single mom named Brenda who used to wait tables at the diner and always dreamed of making wedding cakes. Brenda now ran the back kitchen and made cinnamon rolls that people drove an hour to buy. One Sunday afternoon, Chelsea sat on the front steps during closing time. The air was brisk, the sky soft with that winter haze that turns everything silver. In her hands was a new letter, one she'd written weeks ago but hadn't dared mail. It was addressed to an army post in Germany. That to her brother, Tyler. She'd written about everything. Tom, the bakery, the people, how one man's quiet presence had changed her life in ways she never could have imagined. She mailed it the next morning. 3 weeks later, a reply came. Chelsea didn't open it at the counter. She walked outside, past the little garden box someone had planted with rosemary and thyme, and sat on the bench beneath the bakery's hand-painted sign. She held the envelope like it might vanish if she opened it too fast. But it didn't. "Dear Chels," it began. "I got your letter. I read it 3 times. Then I cried like a damned kid and read it again. I'm proud of you. I wish I could have met Tom. He sounds like someone I would have followed into any battle, any day." She smiled through tears. "You made a home, sis. You made a place for people like him and me to matter. I'll be back soon, and when I get there I want the biggest biscuit and a black coffee. Save me booth 7. I'll sit with him a while." Chelsea folded the letter gently and pressed it to her heart. Inside the bakery the lights were still warm, glowing through the front window. You could just make out the flag, the plaque, and the mug that never moved. She stood and turned toward the door. There was more to build, more to share, more people to serve. And every person who walked through that door, veteran, child, mother, stranger, would be part of what Tom left behind. Not just a memory, a movement. And it all started with a cup of black coffee.